We are Nerd Cult Online, and we are back with another Pinball Effects review. This time we're actually taking a look at the entirety of the Godzilla vs. Kong Pinball pack. So to kick things off, we're going to start with Kong Pinball. Now, for those that have seen the film Godzilla vs. Kong, all three tables actually take place over three different parts of the story from the film. Now,
a strange energy source.
The Kong Pinball table actually takes place on or in Hollow Earth.
If we can contain this energy source,
so you can kind of see some of the floating rocks and some of the emblems, like the ape handprint on that doorway there, which is something that I don't actually remember seeing in the films until we actually got to the latest one, which I believe was
Let's go.
Godzilla X Kong. Now, in the lore, basically, both Kong and Godzilla hate each other to the point that only one of them can remain on the surface world, and Kong, by this point, was essentially exhausted, and they decided to actually basically move him to Hollow Earth, so that way they'll no longer fight each other, and he can finally, rest and basically protect the planet from there. And so, going on this table, one thing I thought was really satisfying was hitting the floating rocks, because they do kind of break apart, which you saw just there. And the overall look of the table is actually great. And I didn't have a lot of high hopes for a Kong and Godzilla themed tables, but I was quite impressed with just the overall layout of the table, as well as just the attention to detail, and the decision to have it focus on Hollow Earth I think was a great idea. My first thought was that it was going to be Skull Island, which is where Kong came from in the Kong movie, and instead they took us to Hollow Earth, which is a much more fascinating, much more beautiful scenery as far as the overall aesthetic is concerned. And on this table, I did have a hard time hitting several of the ramps, almost ever, and
well, that's gone.
So they're not as smooth or not as easy to get into, but the table itself definitely is challenging, and if you don't have a lot of skill, like I tend to be, you're definitely going to be struggling for a bit. But it is definitely one of those tables that is worth playing again, so that way kind of figure out what else is hidden throughout the table. I'm hoping that we get to see some of the other monsters come out and actually fight Kong eventually, if we do well enough on the table. But time obviously will tell on that one. But as far as that goes, like I said, definitely enjoyed the table. It far exceeded my expectations. It was just a bit more difficult to hit those ramps than I would have liked, and hitting those ramps definitely is one of my favorite parts. But triggering some of the missions and hitting the floating rocks definitely were some of the highlights for me, for sure.
There has to be another way.
And next up is Godzilla Pinball. So Godzilla Pinball basically is Godzilla headed towards one of the big cities, with the idea that he's basically going to break into the facility there in order to essentially take on Mechagodzilla that they're building under the ground. And basically they're using some sort of, I believe, skull with and some of the DNA from one of his defeated foes, and that's what's triggering him to come and attack. And because of that being there and having some of the residual brain, I guess, or power from the previous beast, it definitely is a prime target for Godzilla himself. Now, out of the 3 tables, the just general layout of the table, this one's definitely my favorite. I love the way they did Godzilla's spikes and glowing while playing. Now, one thing that can be a little disorienting is the water background, because if you actually just watch that as you play, you'll notice that Godzilla is kind of rising and falling with the water here and there, and so that itself is a little bit distracting, but the overall design, this one was definitely my favorite of the 3.
Come on, big guy.
Just for you're basically playing on his back with the intention of essentially destroying the city, and you actually get points based on how much destruction he causes, and that's where you get some of your bonuses. And just seeing him and being able to control him with the amount of destruction he's causing definitely was a big highlight for this table.
That's the last we've seen of him. He's breached the outer walls. There's still the gate to hold him, though. And here comes that taste of the carnage I was talking about. Titans are destroying our cities and threatening to put humanity on the endangered species list.
He will recover. It might take 1,000 years.
And then lastly, Godzilla vs Kong Pinball.
Welcome, fellow Titan
Now,
chasers, to episode number 116
like I said, of the 3, the overall look of the Godzilla table was my favorite, but basically being able to set up where you can actually fight Mechagodzilla in the last one definitely was a highlight there if I could have actually done well enough. But going into this one, it kind of feels like there should have been like a numbering scheme as far as the stories to identify which one you play first, and with Mechagodzilla involved, that one really should have been the end of the story, and kind of felt like this one would have been more of the beginning. And now what I really love here is that background, just the showing the kind of x-rays and some of the actual diagnostics on the beasts themselves. And don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic looking table. It's just the Godzilla one was my favorite, but this one I actually was probably, in my opinion, the easiest of the 3 as far as hitting ramps and just general play is concerned. But I would say that it's my second favorite aesthetically. The flippers and bumpers for all 3 tables are very responsive, no issues there, and definitely felt like had decent control. But just some of the ramps in the Kong table especially were a bit harder to hit, and this one just was overall much easier for hitting those ramps for me. And overall, we had a great time with all 3 tables. Pleasantly surprised. I did not have high hopes for these tables, considering that I consider that most Godzilla and King Kong stuff other than really the last two movies, to be more meh than anything else. And so to have the three tables themed after one of those movies, I think was definitely a better way to go than having each one themed after a different movie. Since, in my opinion, this was far superior than their individual movies were concerned. But again, as far as the tables go, had a great time, thoroughly enjoyed them, and definitely want to thank Zen for sharing these with us. We definitely appreciate the continued support there, and look forward to the next set that we get to try out.
Activation procedure initiated.
Those missiles are having no effect on that monster!